Motherhood is all-consuming.
Having babies, nursing, feeling the fear of loving someone that much.
And there's this baby on your chest and boom, your entire life has changed.
It's a privilege of being your child's safest space and watching your heart walk around outside of your body.
The truth is, I can be having the best time being a mum 1 minute, and then the next I'm questioning all my life choices.
I'm Lo Mansfield, your host of the Lo and Behold podcast. Mama of 4 littles, former labor and postpartum RN, CLC, and your new best friend in the messy middle space of all the choices you are making in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. If there is one thing I know after years of delivering babies at the bedside and then having and now raising those 4 of my own, it is that there is no such thing as a best way to do any of this. And we're leaning into that truth here. With a mix of real life and what the textbook says, expert insights, and practical applications, each week we're making our way towards stories that we participate in, stories that we are honest about, and stories that are ours. This is the Lo and Behold podcast.
Hello. I am very excited to put today's guest in front of you. We are going to move like a couple years forward on the baby breastfeeding pregnancy timeline that I know so many of you are on. And we're going to talk about your toddlers and your pre-Kers and that season or transition that you might be in now or you will be coming up, where your kids are going to or getting ready to go to pre-K and kinder. Beth Gaskill is with me today. She is trained as a multisensory literacy instructor and an early childhood educator and an elementary school teacher. You probably know her from Big City Readers, which is definitely where I found her on Instagram. She's online as well as Miss Beth, where she is teaching parents and teachers, just giving them all the tools and the strategies that they need to grow their children as lifelong readers. And, you know, my sister used to always say, or she would use a hashtag when she would share on old Instagram posts of raising readers. She loved to talk about just her child and her love for reading. And it's something that's always stuck with me of what does it look like to raise readers? And is there something I can be doing, should be doing? How does our educational system step in and support us in that and with that? Because I got to be honest, like sometimes like I'll have a goal or vision as a mom sometimes, and it is this idea of kiddos like safe in their rooms reading and getting lost in stories and stuff. And so it is something I've definitely wanted for my kids. I love the gift of reading and waste way too many hours every night reading. And so loved having this conversation with Beth about what it looks like to kind of step into this with our kiddos and ideally, hopefully raise lifelong readers as well. Beth, I am so excited to have you here with me. And right before we were just starting, I was telling you that I have kids through kinder, coming into kinder, and more to come. So you are like the perfect person for me personally to talk to. I know that would be true for a bunch of other people with us right now too. Why don't you introduce yourselves? Just tell us like whatever you want to tell, not necessarily the official bio, and then we'll just get into it.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Beth Gaskill. I am a originally learning and behavior specialist. I worked in the classroom. I did teacher coaching, then moved into a reading specialist role in elementary schools, and then built a company. And really, I care a lot about helping parents feel empowered. So I built a tutoring company that then kind of evolved into parent coaching classes before kids even started kindergarten. So our big focus is on, behavior, learning behaviors and learning to read, but a lot of it is on helping parents know what your kids should know at certain stages and are they behind and what's coming home from the school. And I know you said not the official bio, that felt like closer to an official bio.
I just wanted you to tell everyone that you're one of 12 kids. And,
I'm one of 12 kids. Yeah. Well, okay. That's, as I was saying that, I was like, she wants me to say the more personal stuff. I am from a really big family. My parents adopted a whole bunch of kids. I'm the youngest of 4 biological. And then they did foster care and adoption of all different types, open and closed adoptions, and mostly high risk special needs. So I feel like I got to see a lot of like all of those different roles. There were OTs, PTs, speech therapists, so many different people in our home. And so my dream and my goal always growing up was to be able to support parents, whether or not they had a child with severe needs or not, because every child has a lot of needs. And so that means the parents do too.
Yeah, that's really what I love knowing that part of your history, because I feel like so many of us are doing what we're doing because of something, the way we grew up, the siblings we had, maybe an exposure to a sibling who walked through something hard, or ourselves, obviously, like so many in birth, like in the birth world, like I am there. It's the story of I had this horrible birth. And so I like want to change it, or I loved it so much that I want to be a part of it for the rest of my life. So I just feel like there's got to be some relevance there for you of seeing so many siblings walk through school challenges, what it looks like for your parents to navigate really 12 different kids with 12 different needs at 12 different times. Like as a parent of 4, thinking specifically to school and reading and readiness and all that. Like I've told my husband this last year, I have felt so much like our kids are in such different stages. And my spread is only 8 years old to 1 year old, right? But the idea of me going from changing a diaper, maybe getting up at night still with my 1 year old, to my nearly 9 year old navigating like school dynamics, drama with some friends, like whatever's going on almost more emotionally with her. Like that's a big range of responsibility for parents with kids in so many different seasons. And so when you tuck in so much of what you do, reading and readiness and all that, it's just like, sometimes I feel like this other thing of like, am I paying attention to my 3-year-old? Are they going to be ready? Just trying to, I just think bigger families like yours, that probably was apparent to you at some point that you started to see, wow, there's a lot on parents' plates. There's a lot to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, and my parents will say like, the first round raised the second round of kids. But I think what you just said, though, the almost 9-year-old and the 1-year-old, that is an actual crazy age difference that people don't talk about enough. That, you think like, 2 under 2 is crazy, or like a really big age gap. But like my sister has 4 kids also, and her youngest is 1, her oldest just turned 10. And like the science fair project and like having like all of the things like the hot glue gun and then the 1-year-old wandering and grabbing, it is so hard to do both of those like stages at the same time.
Absolutely. We are feeling it over here. It's, I think when you have, they were born like every 2-ish years. So in general, that doesn't seem outlandish to anyone. You're like, oh, you've had a kiddo every couple of years. None of them seem super far apart. But when you think about the top and the bottom, that's where as a parent, you start to say what we're saying here, which is like, ooh, I am being stretched in a lot of ways right now, for sure.
Yes.
That's like kind of a good segue into basically, I am not a teacher. I listened to your podcast the other day, a podcast you did the other day with a teacher, and you two, like, you clearly like understood each other, and it was fun to listen to, but you like knew the words and knew the things. So I feel like when I'm chatting with you right now, it's 100% as a parent who's like, tell me what I need to be thinking about, and not to like shame myself, or what maybe did I miss when my first 2 kiddos were getting ready for school, since I have 2 in and 2 not in yet. So I feel like as we're chatting, almost I'm going to say, like, I'm going to ask the dumb questions. Not that you guys are all dumb who are like me, but like, I know nothing about this except for just as a mom raising her kids and like hoping they learn to read and then they're ready for school and all of that stuff. So I was wondering if you could initially kind of start talking like a little bit about your training or your growth, because I know it's changed from you, and specific to your Orton Gillingham training and what that means. Because as a parent, I've heard those words, now listen to some podcasts about them, but it's still kind of to me like, what was going on in the school system, what's going on now, and where are we at as parents, and then putting our kids into these programs and kinder and all that stuff.
Perfect. And also, I will say there are probably people that have school age kids that have never even heard the words Orton Gillingham. So you're not in the asking the dumb questions. That's already like, because, okay, let's start with like in America, our education system is not regulated. Somebody just messaged me this morning and said, hey, in CPS, Chicago Public Schools, I'm in Chicago, just sent out like assessments. Maybe you should talk on this about the curriculum that Chicago Public Schools use. And I was like, babe, I'm so sorry to tell you, there is not one standard curriculum. It could be different in this classroom or in this classroom. You could have twins in the exact same grade, and across the hall, they're in 2 different classrooms. They're learning different things. So that's one thing. So like, even if you feel like you get it, don't feel like if it gets confusing again, it's your fault, because it's chaotic. But in general, we've made a shift. So there's this actually term, it's called reading wars. I think it's a book as well, but it talks about the 2 different types of learning to read. There's one that's called whole language, and there's a whole bunch of different curriculum under each of these things. So there's science of reading base, which comes originally from like the two big researchers are Orton and Gillingham. And then the other one is whole language. And there's a lot of people in this area. Like one is Lucy Calkins, if you've heard that name. But whole language means like these people said, it's easier to teach kids to just memorize whole words. So you might see like a sight word list and they say, memorize these words. Or like talk to a lot of preschool parents that say like, people are like, oh, they learned the ABCs, great, now do sight words. And like, don't do that. But whole language means they were like, it's easier than telling them to sound out words, just memorize words. And then science of reading is a body of research that shows us that most people learn to read by decoding and sounding words out. And I think that's like 92% of kids should learn in this explicit sounding out way. And that sounding out just means like, look at the word cat, at, say each sound, rather than just show them the word cat and say, this is cat, and then move on to the next word. So that's basically the big difference of those two. And then, so there's a big shift about in the 90s that switched away from the science-backed practices to whole language. And in like 2020, people started to notice, because as we know, like nothing really happens unless parents get involved. And kids were home, they were on Zoom learning, and all these parents started being like, wait a minute, why are they saying just memorize this word? They started saying some things. And of course, there's been teachers that have said like, this doesn't make sense. I was one of the teachers that was taught to just tell kids to memorize. And I did teach that way until I kind of realized it wasn't working. And then I went digging, and that's when I got training in Orton Gillingham. But 2020 is when we started to hear more about people like getting mad. And now there's like, it's that one of these methods has been banned in 15 states at this point in 2025. So we're on the push out of this whole language, memorizing words, look at the pictures and guess, but it's still happening in a lot of schools.
Okay, that's perfect. I'm curious, and maybe you said this and I just totally missed it. So we started more teaching this like science-based approach, moved to whole language, and now there's a shift back. Why did we switch? Did I miss that part? Like, where do you think that came from in the 90s?
Okay, so it came from this woman, Lucy Calkins, and it's actually there's a really good podcast episode covering it. I think it's The Daily, but like breaks it down. But she had this philosophy that kids could just, so she looked at like monogrammed towels, and she noticed that little kids were starting to say, oh, those are my initials. Oh, that's my name, if they would see it on monogrammed things. And so she was like, we're wasting time telling kids to sound words out. We want them to just love reading. So just tell them to look at the words and they can memorize it. But what the research showed us is that her theory on that, like if you look at, look at different classes, right? That like certain level of income would be people that would be paying extra to monogram their kids' things. So we were seeing like, okay, some kids were getting what they needed because some people had extra resources. So they were not learning in school, but they were getting an extra tutor, but the other kids were falling behind.
So that makes me think of, I remember with one of my first kids starting to get ready for school, and I'm assuming this is part of like, yeah, this is why this doesn't work. But just almost the recognition, like, what is this? So the word is this type thing. And I remember one of my girls had a friend in class who hadn't seen all the same like fruits and vegetables or whatever. So there was this classic almost built in of like, this is a super diverse country. We obviously have different socioeconomic statuses and means and access and what we're seeing. And so it was it was the first time I keep saying, like, oh, I feel like a silly parent, but I was like, oh, that kid probably has never ridden a unicycle. Why the heck would they know what a unicycle or even a bicycle, And it was this interesting moment of like this is children's kindergarten work, right? It seems so simple, but when you think about it like that, like we can't just have this expectation of like recognition being the way that we learn, because we're not all coming at this from the same place. Or right. I should say our kids, they're obviously not coming at reading, kindergarten, and education from the same place at all.
It's wild. That's exactly it. So if you have any like early reader books, you'll probably see, I should have had one in front of me, but it's essentially they follow a pattern. So the way you don't want to teach them is if they follow this pattern. So it's like, I like my slide and the picture is a slide. I like my swing and the next picture is swing. So they just memorize the pattern and they're just guessing at that word using the picture. And I exactly what you just said. The next page was, I like my bicycle. And this little girl I was teaching was like, I don't know what that is. And I was like, oh man, she's never seen a bicycle before, and also bicycle, like we learned that C is soft when a Y comes after it in the end of first grade. So like to be giving that as an early reader book in kindergarten is just setting them up for failure. It's literally teaching them to the test. So we just push them along. And then we see third and fourth grade kids are failing because we're not focusing on these decodable books. They're actually like supposed to read. They have like history passages and science passages that they have to read, and they're really struggling. And our nation's report card at last year showed us 66% of fourth graders in the United States are not reading proficiently.
So wild. But I'm sure parents at home can say, yeah, I feel that, or I know that, just as they're putting their own kids through the system and maybe finding that their child is struggling, or that as a parent, I think sometimes too, there's this bit of, wait, like how involved am I supposed to be? Can't I just expect the teachers in the schools to be teaching them, quote, air quoting, the right way? And I think that sometimes as a parent where there's this overwhelm of, oh, whoa, I have to be involved in this. Like I send my kid to school for a reason, like that kind of vibe. So what do you feel like? I mean, obviously a baseline answer is like, no, you're a parent. You need to be involved in your child's education. But how do you think as a parent and getting these little ones ready, we kind of navigate that of, well, yeah, I am sending them to school, but also I need to be paying attention to maybe how they're being taught or where I can help step in or.
Yeah. Well, I would say like first, just having a good relationship with your school. So obviously there's things you can do, but having a good relationship with your school so you know what's going on. A lot of parents that are like big city readers involved have gone to their administration and said like, can you explain the curriculum to me? And I always encourage parents to be like, if you want to see change, you've got to be a part of it. So I'm like, you're going to have to be like, okay, what is it? Do we need to get subs for the teachers so they can get training? Do we need to raise money? Like, what do we need? So ask your school, like what you can do rather than first being like, I'm going to teach them at home. See how you can get involved in the transition at the school. Schools have so much red tape. So like, it might be like they have agreed that they're changing the curriculum, but it's 3 years down the road. But you really, really, really want to push for training for teachers rather than just a new curriculum. Because if you like curriculum sits in a box, the teacher or you, the parent, are going to be the one teaching your child. So if you do things at home, like invest in like learning for yourself rather than just like a game that says it's going to teach your child how to read. Probably similar like to having a baby, someone might be selling like some product that's going to be like, this is the best pillow in your delivery. It's like, no, you want to be empowered to know exactly what it means if this number is showing up or if the doctor says this or like, all those things.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think about that a lot, like birth plans, they have this like hot topic. Should you have one? Should you not? And I am always, someone says, yes, I believe in them, but it's because it's a learning tool. Like you're going to learn something from it, not because you're just going to say, I got this birth plan and I checked the box. Like that doesn't do any really good, right? Because you haven't done anything with it. To like use the metaphor for you, like you've bought the program, but if you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, you're not really serving yourself or, your child well if we're talking about supporting them too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I have a question it's related to a Instagram post. I want to make sure I read this right, but you said, it was a myth that you were addressing. And I feel like this speaks to us parents who are like, whoa, how involved should I have to be? And the myth was, in quotes, like, don't worry, learning to read develops naturally. So can you just talk to us more about your feelings on that idea?
Yeah, actually, I meant to say that earlier when we were talking about the two methods. So the whole language follows like that philosophy. But our brain, when you were born, is typically wired to learn how to walk and talk. Like we actually have that wiring typically in our brain. Of course, there are some situations where we need more support, but your brain is wired usually to do those things, but it is not wired to learn how to read. Like we have to actually teach it how to read. So a lot of people think like, wait and see, it'll develop. And of course, anyone in the early childhood world will caution any wait and see, even if it's talking or walking. But usually those things do develop, not reading. So explicitly teaching, that means like showing your child like, this is the letter L. The sound is ooh. So about 8% of people's brains don't need to be explicitly taught how to read, but that means, 90 some percent do. And so we have to explicitly go through each of the letters and how they blend together. And some kids pick it up faster. Some kids take a little bit longer, but yeah, that's the thought.
Okay. It's interesting. My husband has said stuff before. And I hope he's probably going to be like, great, now they're going to tell me I'm not right. But just this idea of like kids can be like really far ahead when they're younger, but that a lot of people like level out around 11 or 12 when we stop seeing these like significant differences. Certainly some kids are ahead or behind still at that age. Do you feel like there is some truth to that, or perhaps it's true specific to reading as well? Like, do you see a leveling out? And is that why maybe parents are like, they're all going to get there eventually? Or do you feel like there is a little bit of, no, if we're not laying the foundation, you've kind of been talking about this, they're actually going to be struggling when they're in third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade, and that leveling out for reading maybe doesn't happen. There's actually a bigger divide there.
Well, a little bit of both. I do think that kids, like if we're giving them the right tools, some take longer to get there. If we don't give them the right tools, most kids won't get there. So, you might have a first grader, two first graders learning the same things. And one, it just clicks really quickly. And one, it doesn't click until second grade. And then they level out there. It's just kind of like also like your body. Like you might be like, I'm going to cut out sugar. And your husband's going to be like, I'm going to cut out sugar too. And he loses 10 pounds in a day and you gain 4 pounds, But then in like a month of not having sugar, you're like, oh, I have more clarity or I feel better. So that if we're doing the right thing, then yeah, we see the leveling out around a certain point, but we're not going to see it in most kids if they're not getting the right resources.
In the beginning. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask you to talk about some vocabulary words a little bit. So maybe go back to this, like at the beginning, how we're starting with them. Again, you have a ton of podcast episodes about this, so I'll link some in our show notes as well. But I want to talk about the like phonics versus phonological awareness. Did I say those right?
Yeah.
And just kind of what that difference is, and just like really speak to us as parents of what maybe we're looking for or could see in curriculum that shows like what's being utilized or how things are being taught.
Yes. Okay. A funny story about this. I teach this parent and toddler class, and I had this one mom in it for like 2 years. She was in the baby class, then she was in the toddler class, and her daughter's like 2.5. And I would always, this was like 10 years ago, I would always say, okay, I give these tips, like we read this book because it builds rhyming skills, and rhyming skills are super important as early readers, and it builds on phonological awareness. And afterwards she was like, Beth, I can't believe I'm just saying this, but I actually don't know what phonological awareness means. Exactly. And I was like, I'm so she said it like she was embarrassed. And I was like, it is embarrassing for me that I just assumed that. And that was, since then, I'm like, oh my gosh, people need simplicity. Like these are parents that have probably more than one kid, are working, are looking at something so briefly. And so it's such like an art to try and like explain it simply. And then also like be like, explain it in bigger terms for people who have been like maybe listened to every podcast episode, like we know, we get it. So, okay. So phonics, everyone's probably heard of phonics. Hooked on Phonics worked for me if we're all millennials, but phonics is when we connect the letter to the sound. So a letter is visually called a grapheme or the sound. So, okay. So the sound is a phoneme. That's where phonological awareness comes from. So that would be like if you count the phonemes in the word shoe. Can you count the phonemes in the word shoe? It's sh, oo, 2. So phoneme is the smallest unit of sound. Then the grapheme is the written representation. So SH would be what we write for sh. Okay, so we can do all of this without the letters. We play these games with kids to lay the foundation of lifelong literacy. So if we look at the research, it shows us for hundreds of years that the biggest predictor in reading success is strong phonological awareness. And this comes before we really put the letters in front of them. We also build phonological awareness when we put the letters in front. So that would look like singing to your toddler, like Willoughby, Wallaby, an elephant sat on Sam, like just building those rhyming skills. We're just noticing. My sister thinks I'm always gassing her up, but she like says to her kids, like, wadios, badios. And I'm like, that is such a good thing to do. They're just being silly, but you're just helping them notice like, that's not the first sound in that word. So we're just drawing attention to the sounds in words. So that's what phonological awareness is. Phonics is when we match the like visual letter to the sound.
So it's not that there's not a place for phonics. It's that we really maybe we should be starting more from a place of phonological awareness, like sounds before letters. Like we want you to, it sounds like cheesy. I almost think about like, we want you to think about like the art or the gray space behind the word before we teach you to, in theory, like spell the word and see the word. That's
Exactly.
like fluffy, but does that make sense? Yeah.
That's exactly it. Even I see kids, so parents will be like, they don't know how to read. And so I will, hold the book in front of them and ask them to point to the first word. There are so many things like these are phonological awareness skills. Like you could do this with your 3-year-old, like point to the first word, point to the last word. Can you find the letter L? Can you point to a space? So all these things before we're actually asking them to read really matter. And so if I have a kid who they're struggling with reading, one of the first things I'll do is I will not put a book in front of them. I'm going to say a sentence and I'm going to ask them to count the words that I say. So if I say, let's go eat pizza, and they're separating pizza as 2 words, I know right then and there, they're struggling with the difference between syllables and words. And that shows me exactly why they're not able to read the word cupcake, or they're struggling and they shut down when they're writing some simple words that they maybe should know how to write.
It's interesting. I feel like, and this is like true for me as a parent too, like we like seeing results that we can quantify with anything, right? And so I think that almost phonics or maybe some of these other like memorizing sight words lists, you go, oh, she has 9 out of 10 of the words, or look, they can read this many words. And so it feels easy to almost gauge how well your child is doing. And so that can feel like such a nice default of, whereas the, phonological awareness maybe approach is more like they can't read, but they can like recognize, like it feels harder to say, yeah, I think they're doing well or they're ready, because maybe you can't quantify it in the same way.
Yeah.
And so I almost wonder if sometimes there can be this hesitation, or it just feels easier to go toward the one where you can see like input, output, result, right? And whether or not it works, well, that sounds like it's very much not even up for debate. It's probably not the best way. But if it's easier for us as parents, sometimes we just are like, but at least now I can say my son can read and do his ABCs. So he's ready, and having that can make us feel more comfortable, even though these other ways are shown to actually be much more valuable, even though they don't necessarily yield some sparkling 9 out of 10 while we're getting our kiddos down the road.
I know. I often joke that I would be a much smarter business person if I did tell people to memorize sight words, because imagine I could do like 2 lessons with a kid and be like, they know 20 words now, because your brain loves to memorize. It's so easy that's why we do it. I mean, like it does look like kids are reading, but they're fake reading in 1st and 2nd grade. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, we see it looks like they're reading, they're devouring these assessments we're giving them because they're just full of sight words. And it is so easy for a kid to memorize 100 words. I mean, they know if you have a dinosaur obsessed kid, like they can tell you every single name of, they love to store and memorize. So memorizing is the easy part. It's tricky to learn to read. So I'm like, believe me, I'm not trying to sell you something extra. I would be so smart if I just said memorize sight words.
Yeah, well, you would, because we like human beings like results, right?
Yeah.
And I almost feel like what you're teaching is almost more of like, no, let's trust this process, which sounds like such a cheesy thing to say, but it is. It's like, this is about trusting the process, because it will lead us to the point, I don't know, where kids should be where they want to be. I almost said like lead us to whatever reading level, but I actually know that you don't like reading levels.
I do. I hate reading levels.
So maybe you could talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah.
That's where I just took us.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So you might hear from your child's teacher, especially in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, okay, they got assessed. Their reading level is a B. And like, what does that mean? Like, especially to parents, like, okay, great. Oh, also, I just remembered you asked me what would be a good thing to see in your child's curriculum. I'll come back to that. But I don't love this. I think if your child's teacher doesn't tell you a letter like this, that's a good sign, because reading levels are actually just data points for teachers and administration. It's one data point, but it's not a lot. it tells us, so an assessment that would give you this level B is exactly what we talked about, like the pointing to the words and saying, I like the swing, I like the bicycle. So that doesn't tell us really anything. It can be a data point if your school is using it as like 5% of what they're using to track what your child can do. And they say, it's called Fontes and Pinnell is the A to Z. We use Fontes and Pinnell. They're at level D. We want them at level G. But here's what it actually means. Like, this is what you want to hear. Their developmental spelling level shows me that they're really struggling with long vowel patterns, but I can see in their writing analysis that they have got short vowels down. I also gave them an assessment with a decodable reader. They were able to read every single word with CVC words and beginning blends and these 3 digraphs, TH, CH, and SH. And so, like, giving more specifics about what their writing patterns look like, that is what is like really, really important in helping see the whole picture. But like saying they're like a level D means absolutely nothing to me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I just went to some back to school nights. It's fall present day when we're recording this. And so all the kids are going back to school. And I learned that my girls are at a new school this year. And I learned that they don't do spelling tests. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then immediately they said, we don't test like just how to spell individual words because it's all memorization. I know I was like, Beth is going to love this, I think. And they're like, it fleshes out in their writing. And that's where we see like comprehension, and their ability to read and spell. Like you don't like spelling tests are just memorizing. And so I was thinking of you last night, knowing we were going to chat, because I was like, I think if I tell her this, she's going to say, that's great.
It is. Oh my gosh, that's so great.
And their old school did the classic like spelling test every Friday. And to be honest, I never thought much of it. And I would say both my girls, who are past kind of kindergarten, I have a first grader and a third grader right now. So, I mean, my first grader is still very much learning how to read as well. But they both seem to be, good readers and they're doing well in this area. And so I haven't thought much about it now that we're past some of those initial stages of like, how are we doing? Is the foundation strong? But then to know that this new school that they don't do the spelling tests versus the old one that did, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I think we're doing good here. And it wasn't like I did a ton of learning about how they were going to teach my girls specific to this season and reading that we're talking about, because kind of it felt like they've gotten through some of this foundational stuff. But now I'm thinking about my son and my other daughter who will come through and start from this kind of point that we're talking about too. And I'm like, oh, okay. I think that shows that they are maybe more on this side that you're talking about, and it's not about memorizing and all of that. So I just needed you to tell me that that's great for my kids' school. So
it is. I hate spelling tests. They do nothing. You might though see, not you, but someone might see a spelling pattern assessment. And so like you might hear like, we're learning AR words this week. Here are some that we might test them on. But they might give you like 30 words and then like give a random 10 for them to see, just for the teacher to see, are they understanding the spelling pattern, AR versus ER?
Mm-hmm. And I have seen at their old school as well, like tons of that digraph work, like where it's all about what the sounds that the 2 letters make. And I will say a ton of their spelling tests were actually each week it was like, we're working on IA or EA, and so it sounds like they were doing a good job at the old school too.
Yes.
But it was fun to kind of hear that spelling explanation. And my like, I'm going to say like typical parent, like thought process was like, oh no, spelling test, interesting. And then I thought, oh, actually, that's actually excellent.
Yeah.
If they're just memorizing, it's not doing anything. So I was just thinking about it more before talking to you.
I love to hear that.
Okay, last question. And I will just tell you guys again, she has lots of podcasts on this and I'll link some of them again, but just wanted to flesh out a little bit with you of not the whole kindergarten readiness, redshirting conversation, but just some little things to kind of look for in your child as you're getting into like the pre-K years, kinder years, and almost more specifically, share with me some of the, like, you do not have to worry if your child cannot read, like that type of thing. Because I think we have these really big expectations of our kindergartners and we forget that they're going to learn in kindergarten. Like that's the point. So what are some things maybe we do want to see as parents that says, hey, they're ready for kinder, and maybe some other things that do indicate like not quite yet. Both, I'm assuming, behavioral and like learning specific.
So I'll say it is developmentally appropriate to start kindergarten not knowing all of your ABCs. So whatever happens then, the school might flag it or whatever in the first couple of months, and you might panic, but it is still developmentally appropriate. We've changed a lot of standards, but kids haven't changed, Like,
can I ask you a question? When you say not knowing ABCs, do you mean know the ABC song? Do you mean recognizing letters? What do you actually mean when you say no ABCs?
That is so I literally just wrote down as we were talking that I need to make a post about what it actually means to know the ABCs. So knowing the ABCs is going to mean like recognizing the letters, but visually. If you point to the letter, do they know the sound? So we want them to be able to recognize uppercase and lowercase and know the sound when they see it. And know if you say B, they can write a B, uppercase and lowercase. So if they know about 60% in all of those areas, that's great going into kindergarten. A lot of times people just focus on uppercase letters but most books are written in lowercase because we don't write in uppercase. The first letter is. So I would say if you're going to work on ABCs or something with your preschooler, like work on lowercase recognition. So the first thing you want them to be able to do is be able to recognize the letters, and you want them to be able to say the sound. I would say if you're going to focus on one, teach the sound first. Like you show them the letter L and say, ooh, they have to name the letters too, but that's pretty easy to be able to name the letters. It's harder to remember the sounds. We need to know the sounds to blend. Of course, in an ideal world, you're going to teach them the letter and the sound together and uppercase and lowercase together. So that's what knowing the ABCs is, being able to recognize and hear the sound and write it. So if they can do that with about 60% of letters, that's great. But they don't need to be able to do that with the whole alphabet.
So that's something, well, I'll say academically speaking, that is, I'm going to say expectation, but obviously there's a spectrum here, that going into kinder, they can do about half of the alphabet, recognize, see sounds-ish in that way.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that even if a child isn't quite there, that doesn't necessarily indicate like they're not ready for kindergarten. They don't know all their letters. Like,
right. I would say more so, okay, like I look at, can they take turns? Do they know how to talk to adults? Can they self-care? Like, are they able to go to the bathroom independently? Like your child's teacher in kindergarten is probably not going to be able to help them go to the bathroom unless, like they have an aide. Are they able to zip their own coat? Most of the time. It doesn't have to be that they can do these all perfectly, but most of the time, can they do these? Can they count to 10? Can they write their name? These are the things that I would say like to focus on. Can they open their lunch independently? Of course, none of these on their own would be like, oh no, they're not ready for kindergarten. But these kind of simple things like the counting, the being able to stack and count. So if you like have them stack 10 blocks together, like, can they do that? Yeah, those are the things that I would say kind of to look for.
It's interesting. So we got to live abroad with our three oldest kids. And so my first two girls actually did what would be comparable to kinder in the Netherlands. And they start school at the age of 4. And so coming back to the US, where there's so much conversation about redshirting and kindergarten readiness, has been really interesting because you are required to start school at the age of 4, and the government actually will like fine you if your child doesn't go to school. But I say that we loved the education system there. The 4-year-olds were actually allowed to leave early, go home if they needed a nap. But at the age of 5, then moving forward, you have to be at school every day, or you need like a doctor's written notice. Like they are very, I'm going to say strict, like you need to be in school. But it was interesting to have the kids there. They went to an international school, taught some Dutch, but followed maybe more, I'm going to say like international or American principles. Yeah. The Dutch use like different systems. I was looking at this the other night before we were going to talk. But my 4-year-old, sorry, that taking a long time to land the plane. My 4-year-old, when she started, and she actually started the day after she turned 4, because when we moved, her birthday was a couple weeks later. School started the day after her 4th birthday. And so she was there. Like,
oh my gosh, that's
just
so
had
little.
turned 4. And I know it was looking back, I'm like, oh, you're so sweet and little. And
yeah.
But we were very much like, how is this going to go? Because over here in the US, like some of our kids are 5 when they start. Some are even creeping closer to 6. And so it was like, is this going to be appropriate?
Gosh.
And all of the learning or any feedback that we did receive that first year was all the stuff you just talked about. Very behavioral, like, hey, with her, why don't you guys focus on like 2-step tasks? Or if she had a problem sitting still, they had this puppy dog that had like a weighted lubby, and they would get to hold it in their lap. So she was learning, and they were laying the foundation for sure of like, I'm going to call it real learning. I mean, like the more academic stuff. And she's actually an incredible reader, which we are like, wow, they were really doing something in the Netherlands, even though they felt more focused on this like whole child social behavioral part in these little years. So it was just really cool to see. I'm not saying kids should go to full-time school at the age of 4, but the readiness was not tied to numbers and reading and being able to write her name. It felt like it was more tied to this idea of, can you take care of yourself? Can you exist in another space with other people? All of these things then being conducive to then also being able to learn in a group. So it was just really cool to see as a parent, because it does feel like the 2 countries approach those early years a little differently. And I'm not going to say they're doing it better or worse. Like there was pros and cons to both, but it was like almost like we got to have this little experiment by getting to be there and do it. And in thinking about talking to you, and my brain said, I feel like if Beth were there, she would really appreciate the way they like initiate kiddos into school.
Yeah. Well,
and get this started.
I'm so a fan of that. And I love play-based. I wish kindergarten was still play-based, because we know that it's really regulating their nervous systems. And we know that when you have a regulated nervous system, kids will try anything. If they feel safe and secure, they're going to take risks. And learning to read is a risk. Like it's scary. It's basically like, like going zip lining. They've never done this before, and you're asking them to do this out loud, and it's scary. And so if they are dysregulated, then it's like so much harder to do. But if they feel confident going into school and they can take care of themselves, they're so not in fight or flight mode. And they're like, yeah, give me that book. I'm ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like 10 other questions I would ask you, but we're going to stop. I'm like, what about when they're anxious? What about this? Can you tell me all this? But I know you have a lot of free stuff on your Instagram, your blog, all of that. Will you share your Instagram, your website, where they can find your resources and find you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm Big City Readers, and website is bigcityreaders.com. We have a blog with tons of tips and activities that you can print out and do with your child. And the podcast is Play on Words. And I always say, I'm open in my DMs. Like if you're like, I don't know what's going on with my child's school, like send me a picture of what gets sent home for reading, and I will like tell you if I can.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know that I even asked you enough about that, but that idea of being parents and trying almost to like mine the information coming in and trying to figure out, I think can be really overwhelming. So guys, her blog too is awesome. I was again looking at it last night just to see how much is on there, and there's a ton. And I will, like I mentioned, link some, I don't know, just podcast episodes too that I have found really helpful in some of these like kind of early reading kinder years that we're in. Yeah, that we're in too. Okay, last question, ask everyone just for fun. What's something big, small, like it can be so silly or grand in your life right now that is just bringing you a ton of joy?
Oh my gosh. Summer camp. My partner owns a summer camp, and we get to spend like half the year there. And we just went jet skiing yesterday.
Okay. Is it still I mean, I know what the date is, but are the kids back at school or not yet where you are?
So since it's ours, we get to go and like we do like the tear down and all that stuff. So we go up there like through November.
It's like we used to, gosh, in Washington where I'm from, September was like my favorite. It's technically not summer right anymore, but it was like the most gorgeous summer month. Truly was September, and then right into that early push of October is the best. So it's my favorite like summer month when I lived there.
It's 80 degrees today. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love that. Hopefully you can keep enjoying it for a couple more weeks or longer.
Yes.
And thank you so much for honestly just answering all my random parent questions. I know that I have so many parents who are right where I am too. So I know this will be super valuable for them as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all you do. I love your stuff. It's so funny too. You like make such a hard topic seem so enjoyable.
That's that's the goal. Birth can be fun. It can be hard. It can be both. Yeah. Thank you. So good to talk to you.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lo and Behold podcast. I hope there was something for you in today's episode that made you think, made you laugh, or made you feel seen. For show notes and links to the resources, freebies, or discount codes mentioned in this episode, please head over to loandbeholdpodcast.com. If you aren't following along yet, make sure to tap subscribe or follow in your podcast app so we can keep hanging out together. And if you haven't heard it yet today, you're doing a really good job. A little reminder for you before you go. Opinions shared by guests of this show are their own and do not always reflect those of myself and the Labor Mama platform. Additionally, the information you hear on this podcast or that you receive via any linked resources should not be considered medical advice. Please see our full disclaimer at the link in your show notes.